Good morning. The City of Southport Board of Aldermen regular workshop and agenda review meeting, July 7th, 2023, is now called to order. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you for being here. I welcome those who are watching virtually. I want to congratulate our city staff, city employees. What a wonderful 4th of July festival. So please keep that spirit of 1776 with you. Randy Jones, Chairman, thank you so much. It was, I think, no days are perfect. I think that day was perfect. It really was. So thank you, the whole event. So let's keep that spirit going. And I want to thank Mayor Pro Tem Mosteller for presiding over the meetings while I was on vacation. It was a short vacation, but a good one, and I thank you for that. And I did tune in and watch, and I see why people watch the meetings. They're very informative and entertaining. So thank you for that, especially the last one. Yes, entertaining. So thank you for that. Our invocation, as always, when we have a special meeting or workshop, will be by Reverend Alderman Lowe Davis, and it will be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Okay. Let us pray. Most loving, merciful, kind God, we thank you for the blessings that we enjoy here in Southport. We thank you for the opportunity this week to celebrate the creation of this country and keep us mindful of all that we need to do that our founding fathers laid out for us. We ask today that you give us patience, understanding, and keep our minds focused on what's best for Southport. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Alderman Davis. We do have the blessings of Southport, and we are so fortunate. And we keep in mind the celebration of the founding of our country and what our founding fathers would want us to do, and let their example guide us in our work today and every day. Item D is approval of the agenda. On the agenda, you see we have 2 presentations, and then we have the review of our agenda for next week. So I'll entertain a motion. Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Mosteller, second by Mr. Lombardi. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. First item on our agenda is the emergency operating procedure, a presentation by Mr. David McIntyre. And I want to preface that with I want to thank you for that drill that we had a few weeks ago. Dozier Hospital participated in it. It was and you can elaborate on it more, of course, but it was the scenario was a mass shooting at one of the elementary schools, God forbid, and we received 17 patients, and they were their wounds were as realistic as you could get, and so we had gunshot wounds, we had fractures, we had head injuries, we had PTSD patients, and I saw all 17 patients, and we triaged them. We had our whole hospital on alert, and it went very well. So thank you for doing that. So God forbid if something like that does happen, we have at least done a training for that. So thank you, and thank you for the work that you do.
Great work on everybody that was involved with that. Well,
Mr. McIntyre, if you want to make sure your microphone's on.
green light? All right. Green light means I get to go? All right. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to come and speak with the board this morning and share the information of good things that are happening in Brunswick County, specifically to emergency management and our ability to prepare the county as a whole. As mentioned, my name is David McIntyre. I'm the Deputy Director of Emergency Management for Brunswick County. I've been here a little over a year and a half. November will be year 2. A little background on me, just real quick. I retired from the fire service out of Florida, where I spent my last 22 years in the fire service down there for the city of Gainesville, there in north central Florida. No stranger to hurricanes and large disaster events and so forth, but you know, the coastal communities bring a different challenge. So that's one of the reasons we, you know, want to make sure all our plans are up to date and ready to go. What I'm going to do today, I have shared the entire plan with the manager, and so that's available there. But what I'm going to do is just quickly update you on some of the major changes. As you may not know, back about, well, just shy of a year ago, we underwent hiring a contractor. The contractor was IEM. They came in, did a complete rewrite of our emergency operations plan, as well as our county COOP plans, or continuity of operations plans, with the goal of, we didn't want a cookie cutter plan. We wanted something that was specific for Brunswick County, and that we strongly believe that's exactly what we got from them in both instances. So there are some changes as you go through. The plan is laid out. Our previous plan, just for grins and giggles, was a 2014 model, which probably was written in 13. By the time it went through all the processes, got approved in 14. So it was well overdue. So our current plan, the new plan that's in place, effective effective May 15th, when the county board adopted that plan, is cut up into 4 basic sections. We have the base plan, which is kind of just the general overview of how the county will operate, structures, responsibilities, so forth. Appendices will include things like our adoption of NIMS and other documents like that that are important to the overall success of the plan. And then the last 2 sections are made up of our specific annexes, both functional and hazard specific. And these are things like, and we'll go over them a little bit more, but these are things like sheltering, damage assessment, feeding, hurricane response, tornadoes, flooding, et cetera. So in each one of these plans, the annexes are actually set up to operate as a separate plan itself. So if we have one of these type incidents, we can actually pull the plan out, that annex, and run, you know, and that's our guiding document. And because within that plan, it gets into roles and responsibilities, activate what happens at different activation levels in that certain incident. So very well thought out, well thorough plan. One of the first changes that you'll see in our plan compared to our historical activities is we've added a level of activation to our Emergency Operations Center. Traditionally, we operated on a 3-level, and that's a traditional kind of aspect. Level 3, you know, day-to-day, it also included enhanced monitoring by EM staff. And then level 2 was a partial activation. We were putting a limited number of personnel and seats in the EOC just to kind of get things moving, or to handle the entire event, depending on the scale of the event. And then ultimately, like if we're getting impacted by a hurricane, you know, or any other large-scale event that, you know, requires everybody to be in motion, we're going to be at a full activation. And that's all our seats in the EOC are filled. But what we ran into was a lot of times people that don't work within emergency services and public safety and stuff, they kind of get confused. What's the difference between normal operations and then enhanced ready state? So I wanted to separate those. So we added a level 4. So today, in blue skies, we're normal operations. So how do we know the difference between that and a 3? Let's put a area of watch for one of them tropical systems that tend to visit our neighborhoods every once in a while. Say there's something in the Atlantic, the Caribbean, that we're watching, that's going to bump us to a level 3. Another example is about 2 weeks ago when we were, Forest Service was battling the fire in the Green Swamp. We went to level 3. We were just supporting, but we were monitoring the situation, and that only affected internal personnel. So when we make those changes, and if it affects, say, Southport, we will message Southport and make sure that you're aware that the EOC is enhanced and we're ready to support you as needed. But partial activation and full activations remain the same. One of the other big changes for our emergency management plan in general is how we operate within the EOC. Traditionally, we have done a incident command model where we had an incident commander, we had operations, planning, finance, and so forth. And that's great in a command and control type scenario, but one of the biggest things I wanted to foster in understanding how we operate is that the EOC and Brunswick County are here to support and coordinate resources and supplies to municipalities. You as a board and the city as a whole, you guys are planning, spending money, you have staff, all these things are in play, and that's the first step to that response. We want you to work your plans. So we're sitting at the EOC ready to support you if you're running short on supplies, you need something special, whatever it may be, we're there to support. Now, in the unincorporated area, we're still responsible for command and control. So we will still be doing that, but to be able to support and coordinate everything for all the municipalities, we went to the incident support model. I realize in that printout it's a little difficult to see, but in the presentation it's a little easier. But it kind of gives us a chance to break out situational awareness out in its own aspect, in the sense that making sure we have a common operating picture and getting the right information out to everybody around the county, and then communicating it to the state as well. They work in their own little section now, and those key players, are communications, cybersecurity, external affairs, GIS folks for maps, and then state liaisons, and then any specific liaisons that may need to come in. Like we have an incident at the Brunswick nuclear plant, we always have representation there. And then the resource request traditionally, or the new one, has really kind of bought in majority of the operational groups: fire, EMS, law enforcement, public health, and so forth, search and rescue. Those folks are under resource because in this case, they're responsible for adding ambulance task forces, more fire trucks, different aspects. If it's a pandemic type response like we've seen with COVID, Health and Human Services will have a big role of bringing in their assets. Planning will be obviously a big thing, and they're not, in this scenario, they're not only thinking of just the next operational period like we traditionally do, but they're long-term planning as well. They're talking 3, 5, 7 days, 2 weeks, 3 months, depending on the case. So this organization helps us. And then when you read the final group, the facility support group, that support group is solely set to support the EOC, to make sure that we're functioning at 100% and have all the things we need there. And I'm going to digress just a little bit back to the top, and I apologize for not starting at the top, but the Brunswick County, in the far top corner, is kind of a dotted line to the EOC director. There's a multi-agency coordination group, and that's basically where your folks like your town manager and from across all the towns, plus other leadership, county leadership, will get together outside of the EOC operations so that y'all can talk what's going on in your towns at a more, say a 30,000 foot view. The EOC policy group, that's an internal county policy group. That's our leadership, the board, our managers, and so forth, talking to provide guidance. And the MAC group will also provide guidance, or request, like kind of help prioritize stuff for your areas. One of the other big pluses that we're adding is a jurisdictional liaison. That person will probably be, absolutely will be one of our assistant county managers. His role in this position will be to coordinate with the town managers and assistant managers, depending on who's in town and so forth. But that keeps that constant flow of information coming back and forth. So this helps us limit the number of people that are sitting in our EOC, not intended, because we love seeing people from our fellow jurisdictions, but you guys, even at this level, have a responsibility to get out and take care of your constituents. So that's what we want you to do. And then our jurisdictional liaison will help, connect the dots there. Roles and responsibilities are spelled out throughout the plan by position, and those change a little bit here and there depending on the scenario that we're addressing. But it goes through and basically outlines what we'll be doing, or that person will be doing in that role. We talked about the annexes earlier. Currently, there's, I will have to admit, I don't know how we managed to do this, but there is one hazard-specific annex that we have to add. We don't think about it a lot, but tsunamis are a big threat to us, and that's a plan that we have a plan. We just have to update it and plug it in. So as we update the plan on an annual basis, that tsunami plan will be added under annex. A lot of people ask, well, how do you determine who's playing? Let's talk an example of, like right now. There's an incident going on in the intercoastal waterway involving a plane down. So if we ended up having to activate the EOC, we'd go to a level 2, and we just do a partial. So this chart will help us determine exactly who is going to be asked to come to the EOC. So we'd have representation from administration, our communications department, potentially extension, our co-op extension, emergency services, our finance folks, and the sheriff's office. And then we'd bring in specialty operations from the Coast Guard and Marine Patrol and so forth. This tool kind of helps us do that. The other side of the thing, is there is another chart that talks about our essential support functions, ES1 for transportation, and 4.9 for fire and EMS, search and rescue, and so forth. And in that chart, it gives you the information about who's the lead county agency, who supports that response. There is one ESF that has, you'll see 2 lead agencies demarked by the letter L, and that's because initially in a search and rescue scenario, until it is deemed non-criminal per se, or there's no law enforcement threat there, law enforcement is our lead agency, and then once there's termed not to be suspicious activity or something like that, it transitions over to emergency services and handled by us there. So that's the only nuance or difference between that. So you'll see the 2 lead agencies. So that in short is our plan. Like I said, our plan is if you printed it out in its entirety, it's about 900 pages between all the plans. Our plan to ensure that we are keeping it up to date starts off with us doing an annual review is currently going to be scheduled for January, where me and my staff will sit down and we'll go through the entire plan, make any changes, update, the change page that's in the plan, and then those changes would go into effect. And then on an annual basis, my goal is to do just this, come back and meet with boards, meet with town leadership to update the changes that were made, and then on an annual basis, sometime February, March, somewhere in that ballpark, so that we can make sure you have time to train and make any updates. And then on a 5-year rotation, we will basically do a complete, heavy look over and adjustment, and then reset and move forward and get it readopted by the boards, and obviously share that with the municipalities. So that's the plan. Sweet, short, and distant. So I'll, ask anybody's got any questions. Yes, sir.
Can you help me understand under your plan here, am I looking at Center for Documentation? Is that where all the documentation to get FEMA reimbursement and finance and all of that, does that fall into that box there?
Yeah, our documentation unit that's their entire responsibility, is to ensure that all our documentation receipts, 214s, the infamous 214s that everybody has to fill out, and any other supporting documents, contracts, RFPs, all that stuff that has to be there. That's the responsibility.
Is your finance office in charge of that?
They will be, yes.
Okay. We've had issues in the past trying to keep the documentation correctly, and our ability to recoup the money in past administrations has been somewhat less than stellar. It's gotten much better, but
Right.
I'm just trying to figure out how your plan captures that.
Yeah, we're that's always a big piece. So I do recommend, there is a wide range of training out there that is geared. We think about finance sections and stuff like that. Don't worry about those classes. We need to concentrate on the classes that specifically address
How to fill out the
PA,
form.
public assistance, and IA, the individual side. So that helps the financial folks that are responsible for, or whoever you have doing it on your side, make sure they understand the latest, greatest changes that FEMA does. We all know FEMA loves to change things midstream, so that's the easiest way to keep up with it, and then we'll share information that we get as well.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Good. Good. Well, thank you for your time. Y'all have a great day.
That was an excellent presentation, and if you notice on this chart, we have a new sheriff, a new youthful sheriff, Brian Chisholm, and if you'll see on the departmental annex involvement, the sheriff's department is involved in every emergency, every aspect of it. So it's good to see that they were here for July 4th, which was a wonderful event, and so they're here for the untoward events as well as for the planned events. And so our police department, Chief Coring, thank you for what y'all did. It's just incredible to get in thousands and thousands of people. You're working with the Sheriff's Department and the other agencies that you and I talked about that came in to help. It was just a marvelous display of cooperation and safety and that type of thing. So thank you for that. So we'll certainly be a part of this, and as Alderman Davis said, the Caribbean is full of tropical storms right now, and they're going to keep coming. So we'll hopefully they'll avoid us, but we'll be ready. The next item on the agenda is short-term rentals presentation. Mr. Henley.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board, good morning. This is going to be hopefully short, sweet, to the point, just like the last one. But it's also me, so we'll see how well that actually works. So just to start off with some reminders about definitions. There's a lot more definitions than this that I could have included here, but these are really the two that are most important. A short-term vacation rental is defined by our UDO as a dwelling unit with up to 6 guest rooms that is used and or advertised through an online platform or other media for transient occupancy for a period of less than 30 days. A short-term vacation rental is considered a non-residential lodging use under this UDO. The owner is not required to be present during the rental stay. The other version that we have is a homestay, which is private resident occupied dwelling unit with up to 2 guest rooms where overnight lodging accommodations are provided to transients for compensation and where the use is subordinate and incidental to the primary residential use of the building. The key difference, a homestay is considered an accessory lodging use under this UDO as opposed to a non-residential use. And the permanent resident is present during the rental stay, and by our ordinance, they're required to be present. So I'm going to use the term short-term rentals to refer to both in some cases, just because it's simpler. The distinctions I'll make as we go through this. What's in place today? And we get that question quite a bit. Everything that's in the UDO, other than what the board voted not to enforce any longer, the registration requirements that were made illegal across the state, are still enforced today. And that's what staff enforces. That's what we tell folks when we get questions about it. The text amendment that's going to finally remove the registration requirement, which should have been done a while ago, but there's been other more pressing fires to handle, is going to be on the planning board's agenda for July, and then once the planning board has voted on it, it will be on your agenda for your consideration as well. Now, it being a text amendment, the planning board may have additional recommendations with regard to that topic that may show up in the ordinance as well. Let's see. As a reminder, the primary regulation that we still have enforced today with regard to STRs and homestays is how we permit them as a use inside the zoning districts of the city. So short-term rentals, short-term vacation rentals, are permitted with standards, and it's 2 full pages worth of standards, in the CBD, BD, and PUD zoning districts. Now, the caveat with the PUD zoning district is that most, if not all, places in Southport's planning jurisdiction that are zoned PUD are going to have their own covenants and restrictions. And I'd have to imagine in most cases, those covenants and restrictions are going to make these not permissible. But that would be up for those individual neighborhoods to determine. Homestays are permitted with standards in the R10, R20, multifamily, and PUD district as well. And again, those being accessory uses to primary residential uses of property. That's where that was found to be allowable in the residential districts. There are different standards. There's a number of standards that apply to both of them. There's a number of standards that are written slightly differently, slightly more strict on short-term rentals versus the homestays, but that's where the ordinance sits today. Any use of either a short-term rental or a homestay in a district in which the use is not permitted, or in a district where it is permitted but not in compliance with the standards, may be possible to continue as a legal nonconformity just like any other land use under the UDO, if it was established prior to the adoption date of the original ordinance in 2021, and if the applicant or the property owner followed the standards for capturing those nonconformities when the city undertook this original effort for the adoption. So when the city originally adopted the language, the city asked for anybody with a short-term rental to come get a zoning permit. And that's what locked in the legal nonconformity. And that's what we did, and that led to the master list that we have that we run off of for enforcement today.
Right now, if we know of a short-term vacation rental that was not part of that original permitting, what are we doing about it?
I'm glad you
Okay.
asked. So enforcement of these is tricky. We've got a few tactics that we use. The benefit for me being new to Southport is that there's a number of locals in the office that we can help with. So if we're just cruising Airbnb or VRBO, the website, and they don't show you the address, but if you look at the picture of the home, sometimes you can see the street address. But if not, there's enough locals in the office that can say, oh, that's so-and-so's house on Atlantic Street, or that's so-and-so's house on West Street. So that's helpful. Using room occupancy tax filings, working with Teresa. The challenge with that, though, is you have the option. I know you have this option through Airbnb. I believe VRBO, you have this option as well. But if I'm the owner of a short-term rental through one of those programs, I can opt in to have Airbnb take care of the room occupancy taxes. And when Airbnb gives us the tax amounts, it's just one lump sum. It doesn't reference who they are. So the fix to that going forward is, as part of a zoning permit for one of these items, they have to tell us, which one are you going to do? But going retroactive back to these legal nonconformities that already exist, that's going to be a little bit more challenging. Direct observation, of course, if our code enforcement officers are around town and they see that as they're drive down Atlantic Street, I'm just picking on Atlantic Street, I guess, today, but if they're driving down Atlantic Street and they see, okay, today there was a yellow Nissan parked there, and tomorrow it's a Jeep, and this day it's if the rotation of the cars keeps changing, that's something to say, hey, wait a minute, something might be going on here. Of course, complaints as well. I know we've switched to a proactive code enforcement system, but that does not mean we're not still accepting complaints. We want to hear them, but this is tricky. I've reached out to a number of different municipalities that are in some way similar to Southport and our features, not just on the coast. Looked in the sandhills, looked in the mountains, and what are you folks doing about enforcement of this stuff? And I got 3 answers. 1, I didn't get an answer. They just didn't respond. 2, we don't care about short-term rentals. We don't regulate them. Or 3, when you figure it out, let us know. So this is, even Alliance has helped a lot since they've been here with this, but even this is what they're used to as well. This is all that really exists to try to enforce it. It's tricky. It takes time, but I know Mo just provided Chris with Alliance a list of 12 properties that we've identified that are not on our list. That happened this week.
So what happens when we're made aware of a property that's not on our list? I'll also go back to say that before I believe that permits were granted that showed no proof of having been a short-term rental prior to the ordinance. I know of properties that were not short-term rentals that did get permitted. They showed no proof of having paid an occupancy tax. They couldn't provide, the list goes on and on. I know they exist. But what happens when you're made aware of them? Code enforcement sends them a letter, makes them aware. They say, we don't care, we're going to continue to do it. Like, what are the processes?
Well, it's treated just like any other zoning violation would be because of how we've got it set up, which is actually really helpful. So it would follow the same timeline that's laid out for enforcement of any other zoning violation in the UDO, and then ultimately, the end of the line there is a court-ordered injunction. And Hopefully, it doesn't ever get to that point, but that's the end of the line for that sort of thing. It hasn't had to get to that point yet since I've been here, but doesn't mean it won't in the future.
Thank you. How can the public in general see the master list so that if they, for example, see different cars showing up and so on, that they can look and see, oh, okay, this is one that has a permit, or, uh-oh.
I don't believe it is published, but that we can certainly do that. There's also, we've been working with Teresa to build a little handout that's going to go out with the utility bill in the next couple months or so. That'll go out to every resident with a utility bill. That just a very, very simple. These are the short-term rental rules. This is who you call if you have questions or anything like that. So that's coming.
Put it on the city website.
Absolutely.
In our, the horizontal menu of major issues and things to know.
These are civil penalties, are they not?
Yes, they are.
And thus, to go forward beyond Southport into Bolivia in the court system, we would have to supply a lawyer, correct?
Yes.
A lawyer. We don't have a DA to do this, so we have to have a lawyer. And there's fees to do all of that. Is the system set up to be able to do that?
I think we could make it work if there were just a sparing number. We haven't had to get to that point on anything yet since I've been here. I know I've had experience with that in other places, and we ended up having to hire a separate attorney just to handle those items in previous roles. Not saying that we need to do that now.
And the last thing I want is to be dragging people over to Bolivia to a civil court hearing, because it's cost the city money, cost the taxpayers money, and it's going to be more money than we're going to get in the fine. I mean, but if you don't do it, then you allow everybody just to thumb their nose at you. So do we have a process, a written process that says this is what we're going to do, yada, 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 yada?
Long-term, the process needs to be beefed up, but yes. The written process is actually in the UDO. It's the ordinance itself, and that's what we would follow.
Okay.
Could it have more teeth associated with it? Yes, it could.
All right, well, since we brought this topic up here, I guess I'll have an offline conversation with the manager about what do we need to do with that, put more teeth into it, or should we think ahead over the horizon and say, is the law firm that we have the right one to do that particular work, and do we have to go out and find a law firm? If we're doing it on game day, that's not how you want to play that game. You want to be able to understand what law firm is most applicable for that kind of work. What are they going to charge us? How are we going to do all of that and have that all set up? I would think that's the way to do it.
It is. You're absolutely right.
Okay. Thank you.
You referred to code enforcement and the code enforcement company that we're using. Haven't they gotten pretty close to going to court level on some of the code enforcement? And so we're going to have to deal with that then anyway.
We are. At some point, we're going to have to deal with this, whether it's on this topic or something else. If that's when you go proactive, that's one of the things that happens. And so.
We've had a citizen, I believe it's at court level or was, about a cat bite. I mean, people are going to go to court if they want to.
Yes, they do.
So are you going to talk some more about other enforcement possibilities? Are you like hiring somebody to, a Granicus or somebody to
So we actually,
do this?
We've met with them. I think they were met with before I started, and then we've met with them again. And in talking to staff and manager, the cost does not seem to outweigh the benefit for the small geographic area that we are. If we had to cover an area 10 times our size, it might be more beneficial. But by virtue of the volume, the records that we have from the past and just our size, the cost did not seem to justify the benefit.
Did we, okay. Can you give us some information on what that cost is and that, and not, you know, I mean, if you don't have it right this second, that's
I don't have it
fine,
off the top of my head, but I
that's
know
fine,
it
just
was,
get us some.
it was more expensive than we all thought it would be. I think 12 or 15 a year.
That's what I was thinking, 10,
Yeah.
at least 10.
It also is a system that we were not sure how well it would jive with our existing permitting systems either. And without that cross integration, that would make things a lot more difficult as well.
Maybe you said this already, Travis, and what is our goal moving forward? How do we find a way to document these? I mean, I know we can't permit them, but I don't know.
Well, we can
just-
permit the new ones in accordance with, that list. So
Right.
there can be new ones that still come online. And those would run through the process that is in our UDO today. Now, what I'll say is that most folks are looking to do the short-term rental version in the residential areas. And so the answer is, if they call us, the answer is, well, sorry, the answer is no. Which then leads to them, people just doing it, which is why monitoring these websites, just trying to keep tabs on it out in the field is really the only way.
Just going to add that we've actually talked about getting an intern to help us work on some of these things over the summer and things like that. Travis has reached out to UNC Wilmington about the possibility of getting something. At least that way we can get a good base and good program started here, and then it might be easier for staff to maintain.
Yeah, I was hoping they would have gotten back to me by now, but they're looking. It's summer. A lot of them leave. And that's when we were talking to them, so.
Let's talk about just a couple of other, to get into the weeds a little bit. If someone hasn't rented their property short-term for a period of more than how many months? 6 months, I believe, then they can no longer continue to use it as a short-term rental.
Correct. Same way if I've got a legal non-conforming restaurant on a residentially zoned property and I shut the restaurant down for 6 months, I can't then come back and say, oh, I want to open another restaurant. Well, nope, sorry.
Okay. And if the property transfers, the property can continue to be used as a short-term rental.
It runs with the property,
Yep.
not with the owner.
I think one of our issues is that we need to be a little more proactive with education on this. Hopefully, the State Port pilot will write a good article about what this really looks like. Because people, once we made the vote about the permitting process, I heard a lot more chatter about, oh, we can do this now. And they didn't fully understand what we were, yeah. So I think we just need to be proactive with some education on what it really means.
Absolutely, we can do that. Oh gosh, I'll let you. I don't want to speculate on the exact number. It's not as many as I thought there would be when I first came here. That's for sure. But I'll send everybody this PowerPoint and I'll include the number on the list when I send it. Oh, sure, absolutely. I do have one more slide, and it's just, if I get back to it. This is gonna be back. Senate Bill 667 didn't make crossover, but this would have absolutely gutted everything we have on short-term rentals. And it also would, for accessory dwelling units, it also would have allowed for them to happen in those as well. So it's just something to keep in the back of your mind for these next few sessions. I have no doubt that this topic is going to come back. And seeing how other bills went through this session. Yeah, this is coming.
Do you have, in your world of planning, an idea or the ability to figure out which jurisdictions have similar type legislation as we do, so that we could be more proactive in getting them to help if another 667 comes up? We've already had the conversation. They're prepared to understand what it is that we all need to do, and that's contact our legislators, because quite frankly, most of the stuff that got killed this year, I'm going to hand it to the citizens and not to anybody else. Their massive writing is what really did it. And so how do we pre-stack that?
We have the ability to do it. However, we are, as Southport, we're a little bit unique. A lot of the other localities in the region either aren't touching it because they don't have the capacity to touch it, or aren't touching it because
They want it.
they want it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I was just curious, during the course of this, between now and the next legislative session, if you come across jurisdictions that you find in your business world, if you could keep track of them so we could be more proactive and target where we want to talk to people.
coalition of the willing.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
That's all I've got for this morning. So. Only on this topic. That's right. Oh, I know. I'm not going anywhere.
I got one more. Do you reach out, or have we been reaching out to the ones that are actually doing it just to check in?
We're trying to. There's really not many that we found that are doing it. I think I was trying to keep it close to similar towns as us, trying to take into account what capacities exist at those levels versus like a city of Charlotte or something, but I don't think we have that ability anymore, so that's where we're going next.
No, I was meaning the participants in the program.
Oh,
the
that.
people
Oh, sorry.
in the city who are doing it. Do we, have a way to, or are we contacting them just to let them?
I don't know that they've all been contacted specifically, but that's certainly something we can do as well. And the mailer that will be incorporated in the utility bills, that's going to every account citywide.
Travis, in regard to hiring a firm to assist with this situation, I'd certainly be in favor of spending $10,000 a year on somebody to help us with it, because I think we're spending a whole lot more than that on staff time trying to run around, figure out what's what. So I'd just like to encourage staff to continue looking into whether there's an organization out there that can provide us with some meaningful help on tracking these things. I think we're spending a lot of money on staff time and effort doing this that I think we could outsource it more effectively.
Yeah, and I would certainly support that. I think that's a good idea.
Very good presentation, very good discussion. Short-term rentals is always a challenge, and we move forward in the best way possible to make sure the town is not dotted with animal house-like activity in our neighborhoods. I mean, that's what we're trying to avoid. And but people, I think that all of Southport's like that, right? I mean, how do you distinguish? And the other thing is, there must be a list somewhere because these people are accessing these. So it's already out there. I mean, the list is there. I mean, whoever accesses these places to stay, unless they're Nostradamus, they have to go online to find it and interact. So we will keep working on this. I mean, we want to protect the uniqueness of our neighborhoods. Item 3 is the review of the July 13th, 2023 Board of Aldermen agenda. And you have the agenda in front of you. And if you look at it, it's pretty standard. And we go to item F on this agenda, approval of the consent agenda. And those are basically approval of minutes from previous meetings. Any questions, discussion on that? And then item G is we're going to do a proclamation for Parks and Recreation Month, something so important. We have a very robust Parks and Rec, and we want to honor them and proclaim them appropriately. And then on the main agenda, we had I asked them to move the public hearing up to the first spot on the public hearing, conditional rezoning. That way it's those that they absolutely want to speak in public comment on it, they can. Or if they would rather wait till the public hearing, that's fine. But we're not going to inhibit anyone from speaking on conditional zoning. But there is a public hearing on that, and that will be at the beginning of the meeting. And then we have
Do we want to comment on these as we go through them, or do we want to?
Yes, if you have.
Okay.
Yes, as we're going.
So my only comment here is, and I just wanted to make sure we had clarification that we don't plan to vote on conditional rezoning.
No, there's no vote. This is just a public hearing. Yeah.
Well, in the past, I just wanted to make sure. Okay. Thank you.
There's no vote.
So, Madam Clerk, can you help me understand the logistics of this? Is this a typical Alderman public comment period where people get up and speak and there's no reaction or comment back from?
No, it's a public hearing. It's back and forth. Yes.
There is back and
Oh,
forth.
yes, absolutely. It's a
I just
public
want to
hearing.
confirm that we
Oh,
can
yeah.
have
It's
that.
just like any other public hearing. Absolutely. It's not public comment. It's public hearing.
I guess I was trying to figure out what's the difference between this and a workshop.
There's also back and forth.
Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure
Yeah,
that people understood it was going to be back and forth.
Yeah,
as opposed to-
there's no, that's the purpose of it. We want to hear, and if they have questions, we want to answer them. And if we can't answer them right then we'll get back to them. But yeah, there's a back and
All
forth
right,
on this.
Thank you.
I guess my reason for asking about the vote was really because I think that at our last meeting, or the workshop, there was comments about us doing another workshop or other meetings about.
If necessary,
Okay.
if we needed another workshop on this, in other words, we were not rushing this through. We're giving the public adequate time to make sure that their voices heard
Okay.
and all their questions and concerns were answered and that type of thing. Okay, agenda item 2 will be the annexation public hearing. That you've already seen that before. That's the lots in the landing. Is that right, Mr. Henley? And they want annexation. Item 3 is a very a joyful one, Maritime Museum concession that the city cooperating with the Maritime Museum and the contract there. And we have Mr. Berry here. We have Tom here. Do y'all want to give us a comment, please? Yes, please.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Board of Aldermen, city staff. My name's Tom Hale. I'm the chairman of the board of directors of the Friends of the Maritime Museum. With me is Wayne Berry, our treasurer, and also Kathy Dudley, our administrative officer. I don't know what you have in front of you for read-ahead packages, either today or in front of your regular meeting, but a brief recap on how we got here and why we are here. Through concession agreement between the city of Southport, the state of North Carolina, and the Friends of the Maritime Museum, which is a nonprofit organization, the Maritime Museum at Southport occupies the buildings formerly known as the Fort Johnston Family Housing Area. We're under a concession agreement. It's a 10-year concession agreement. It expires in on May 31st, 2024. The last concession agreement, when the entity moved from a privately owned at the ports of call over to the current location, the concession agreement took 2 years to get through city and the state. The Friends are trying to be or have been proactive. We sat down, we looked through the concession agreement, we revised it, we have recommended edits. In May, we met with the city manager. She came over, Wayne Berry was there, Wayne Strickland, who's also on the board, to provide a lot of background and context for the city manager. We walked through the concession agreement, the recommended new concession agreement. She took it back, reviewed it at her office with the city staff, gave it to the city attorney. City attorney reviewed it. He provided it back. So the city provided it back to us with minor edits. I have taken the liberty of providing it to the state, letting them know that it has not been approved by the city. So Wayne and Kathy and I are here to answer any questions you may have, provide any background. Again, the current concession agreement expires May 31st of next year. We're trying to be proactive because, as I said, it took 2 years the last time. We would need to get it done, or we would like to get it done, because there are 2 additional documents that go along with this. One is a memorandum of agreement, which is between the state and the Friends, but it is all contingent upon the concession agreement. With that, I'll shut up and see if anybody has any questions, either for myself or for Wayne or for Kathy. Again, thank you for your time.
Who owns the responsibility of maintaining the building in good, proper order?
Wayne, you want to come up and help me out? Speak to the mic. It's not an easy answer.
Basically, of course, the buildings are
I'm
owned
sorry?
by the buildings are owned by the city of Southport. But the maintenance of the buildings have been assigned to the Friends of the Maritime Museum, and that's why the Friends are a part of the concession agreement. So far, the Friends has spent about $600,000 improving those buildings to be used for the Maritime Museum. Through the concession agreement, we're charged with the responsibility of maintaining those buildings. The only thing that city is responsible for is the insurance on the buildings themselves, not the contents, but just the buildings.
You're talking about the entire Fort Johnston building, or the
No,
part
ma'am.
that you occupy?
No, ma'am, the buildings that we occupy, which is the original officers' quarters and enlisted members' quarters, there were four apartments, 2 in each building, and the concession agreement covers those 2 buildings, which we have joined together now to make one. The exhibit hall is in one, and education center in the other. Basically, we started out with about 3,000 square feet, and we've added another 3,200. So we're talking about 6,200 square feet of building.
And one of the reasons I brought my question up is because the city is doing a review of all city-owned buildings, and that's one of them,
Yes.
to look at, trying to get an idea of when do you need to put a new roof on, when's the AC going to go out on you, things like that.
Yeah.
So I was curious,
Yeah.
in that building, and then this
Well,
Franklin Park, what was
The-
the same kind of questions?
Okay. In the renovations that we've done, the roofs basically are new and wouldn't be anticipated to be replaced maybe another 7 or 8 years. We did have some problems with leakage in some of the roof, which has been taken care of at this point. Right now, we're having some problems with the air conditioning system, but we're taking care of that.
Okay, because sooner or later, we're going to get this report back, and hopefully it'll say your building's A-OK and there's nothing that needs to be done, but
Yes.
my question is, for budgeting purposes, I needed to know who pays for what.
Yeah, I think it would be great if the city could include those buildings and let it be included as far as when repairs or improvements should be made or replaced.
I'm assuming that, because I've asked that question, and the answer I got, my interpretation was all of those buildings would be on that list.
Yes.
I believe that is the case that's included in the study. It will be included in the study.
Yeah, and I will note that the concession agreement, we've recommended some minor edits with regards to what the state requirements are, not the city, because it's, the Friends have paid for a lot of the operating expenses. And it's our contention as a nonprofit that state of North Carolina, this is your museum, you should be picking up utility bills, landscaping, contracting, things like that. So there are some modifications in our recommended concession agreement, but it does not go to increasing the requirements on the city. It goes to increasing the requirements on the state. If I missed that.
And I'm assuming Beaufort is tied to this whole thing as well?
They are one of the museums. The third maritime museum is up at Hatteras. So there are 3 maritime museums.
Are they all asking for the same thing?
We're totally different, and Wayne, I know, will correct me if I'm wrong, but the museum here at Southport has the unique relationships that we do, former federal land, a state museum, and a city-owned building, whereas Beaufort is owned by the state, as is Hatteras.
Okay, thank you.
Do you plan on being here at the meeting on Thursday?
I will not, because I will be out of the country, but Wayne Berry and Kathy Dudley will be here, yes.
Perfect.
Yes, we want to support our Maritime Museum in every way possible. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
When you're here on Thursday night for our meeting, it'd be good to make sure that the audience understands what you're referring to by the state. It's SHPA, of course, but they may not know.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Lease agreement, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Berry, always for your wisdom. Item 4 is a W.K. Dixon contract agreement that has to do with the sewer lift stations, that type thing, in terms of repair, and you have that information in your packet. Any questions on that, board? Okay. Item 5,
Sorry, I'm probably going to have some questions about the length of time to achieve the goal of fixing the 3 stations. It appears to me to about 2.5 years, and that seems like an exceedingly long time. I don't know why we can't write a contract that's going to be short of that. So I just want to let people know that I'll be bringing that up.
I will try to have an answer. He asked why the contract was for a period of 2.5 years to fix those pump stations. It seems like a long time. So I'll make sure to check with our engineer
Okay.
to see if that's reasonable. And he will be there at the meeting as well, so.
Right. Thank you. Maybe we can talk offline. Thank you.
5 is the financial policies for taxes on split jurisdiction properties, and the Powell bill policy. Hey, Mr. Gross, thank you.
Okay, continuing with our priority to write policies for the city of Southport. We appreciate the 2 that you passed last month, and hopefully we'll have 2 more passed next week, and I should have 2 more for you in August. The first one that I'd like to talk about is a policy that addresses the water and sewer rates on split parcels of land. I'm not sure, Dory, if the board has this document or not.
They have a copy of
They do have copies.
whatever you gave me.
Okay. Well, I've got extra copies if you'd like to just pass it around. So, we have approximately 30 parcels of land in which the city limits run right through the parcel. And of those 30 parcels of land that are split between the city and the ETJ, approximately 16 of them have been developed with homes. What we don't have is a policy on how we treat the water and sewer rates on these 16 parcels of developed land with homes. And what I have just passed out for you to look at are these 16 parcels of land. And you can see the parcels of land that are billed the inside city limit water rate and the inside sewer rate, and the parcels of land that are billed outside water and sewer. In addition, if you're inside the city limit, if you're getting inside water and sewer rates, you are also receiving recycling and debris pickup services. So when this issue was brought to my attention, the first thing that jumped out at me was we have two parcels of land that are 50 and 60% that are paying the outside rate. So I'm calling those outliers. And we have, looks like 4 parcels of land that are paying the outside rate. So I had a Zoom call with Brady Herman, our city attorney. Teresa and I were on that call, and we shared this data with Brady. And we concluded not only do we need a policy, but we need a policy that specifically defines where the cutoff is on who's getting the lower rate versus the higher rate. And in looking at this data, Brady suggested, and Teresa and I agreed with him, that we use 25% if a parcel of land is at least 25% inside the Southport city limits, that they get the inside water and sewer rate, as well as debris and recyclable pickup. There would be some changes, obviously, made to how we're currently billing based on this document, but we felt that based on what we see in this data, it looks like the intent of prior decision makers, whoever were setting these rates prior to Teresa and my time with the city, it looks like 25% was the cutoff for receiving the lower rate. We're certainly capable of adjusting that. It's the Board of Aldermen's decision, but that was the conclusion that the city attorney, Teresa, and I came to, of using 25% as a cutoff. And I'll be happy to entertain any questions. Yes, Lou?
Those that are receiving the city rate, are they all within the 25%, or are they more?
Yeah.
Well, I'd be darned. There it is. I was looking at all the yeses and nos, and I didn't see that. Thank you.
I don't know that this makes sense, but once these people are paying the inside rates, there's no benefit to them to not be fully annexed. Is that correct?
So
There's little benefit.
So those that are having to pay the outside rate can voluntarily request annexation to get the inside water and sewer rate.
Okay.
So that is their option.
Why would they want to pay twice as much?
They would pay.
They would pay less.
They would pay less.
The ones outside pay
Pay less,
pay
right?
more currently.
The outside is the county, right?
Outside is the higher county rate, well, is the ETJ rate,
So they're paying more for,
water and sewer.
water and sewer.
Correct.
They
Has
pay
anyone-
approximately one and a half times, I believe,
Yes,
if I'm
the
remembering
inside
correctly.
water
I'd have
rate-
to get the rate sheets, but
Yeah, I've actually have it here, and inside water's base is $26.45. Sewer inside is $78.54. Outside water is $43. That's going from 26 to 43. And outside sewer is $154.24, up from $78.54.
It's like the county manager stood in that corner one day and said that if people were to be in the county, they would pay 1/2 the Southport rate for sewage.
Not in the county water and sewer customers.
Yeah. Correct.
He was talking about their customers, these are our customers.
These are our customers. They're receiving water and sewer services through the city of Southport.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem.
I misunderstood, yes. Okay.
So should there be an effort to try to get all of these, to reach out to these people and get them annexed? I don't know. Maybe that's
Well-
it just seems like,
I
I appreciate the policy. I just
Yeah.
think that we wouldn't need the policy if they just,
I think that's something we can certainly look into. It's a totally different ballgame as it comes to how their property taxes are handled, which I've not really addressed here, but their property taxes are prorated based on the percentage of the parcel of land that's within the city limits versus the percentage of parcel of land that's in the ETJ vis-à-vis the county.
certainly these people paying with 90% in the city, there wouldn't be much additional cost for them to be annexed. Because they're only,
That's a reasonable conclusion, because they're already
Okay.
paying 90% of their
Of the
assessed
tax.
value, the city ad valorem tax rate.
okay. They,
Everybody pays county tax.
Right.
In addition, they would pay 90% of the city tax versus 301 Yopon, they're paying 9% of the city tax rate.
To simplify, what are the motivations then to annex, and what are the motivations not to?
that's, yeah.
The other differences are when you're in the city limits, you do have police protection and service versus having to call the sheriff's office when something happens. Typically, you're already paying the fire district fee and the hospital district fee. So the difference would just be the cost of the taxes, and you're already probably going to have the benefit of paying the inside water and sewer rates if you're within 25% or more of the city.
do,
I just think it'd be, I don't know if this is development services that would reach out through a letter or, some type of contact, but I think it would be interesting to have this conversation, especially for the person, or persons paying 80, 85, 89, 90% already of the Southport tax. Why not just come on in?
Come on in and get all the services.
Yeah.
We can certainly reach out to them. Annexation, we're only allowed to do voluntary annexations now, so of course, it would still be their decision, but.
Fine with the 25% threshold as well.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
yeah. I've got a question. Do we know if these, do you qualify then to also vote in our municipality?
I do not know the answer to that question, but that's a good question.
I'm curious what that is. Right. I think I'm just curious.
Okay. We can look that up and find the answer to that one.
Because if they're not full taxpayers, I don't know how that would be.
Yeah, we'll research that one and get back with you.
It's one of the benefits of annexation. You become a part and you can vote. And so that's, to me, it
Bonnet's
wasn't
way.
mentioned as an
Yeah.
advantage, but to me, not only police, but you have the opportunity to vote.
And Bonnet's Way, that was one of the reasons they initially asked to annex in.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so we'll move on to the next one, Dory. And the next one, seemed like we had a lot of questions in the last 6 months about the POW bill. So I decided to just write a POW bill policy real quick. And this was a very easy one because it's 99% verbatim right off of the POW bill website, with some additions as to what the responsibilities are for the staff in Southport. So I wanted to make sure that we had a POW bill. It's very specific on what we can spend POW bill money on legally. It also identifies the responsibilities of our developmental services department head to meet a deadline, which is coming up July 21st, and responsibilities for the finance director's office to meet expenditure report deadlines, which are coming up August 1st. And the penalty for not meeting these deadlines is no POW bill money until you do. So we're on top of it. I've talked to Travis twice in the last week just to remind him, talked to Brandon, and we're juggling a lot of deadlines here for the auditors, but we're going to get it done.
In the past, do you know if we've not met that?
No, we've always
Always
met
met
it.
it?
We've
Okay.
always met it. There's also a language in here that talks about accumulating POW bill money and how long you can accumulate it. And based on the size, POW bill money is handed out twice a year. And based on the size of our municipality, we can accumulate up to 20 allocations before we could not accept any more money. And we're not anywhere close to being in danger of doing that.
And just for the record, do you know how much the total POW bill money is?
Currently, we're approximately, 300,000 plus.
That's our balance.
That's
Don't
our
we get about
balance.
150 or 180 a year or something like
It's about
that?
45?
$145,000, $150,000 a year is our allocation.
Couple of stop signs. Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Buy us a dump truck that we're going to use to work on the streets.
There you go. All right. Any other questions about the POW bill? Thank you very much.
Thank you. We look forward to next month's two policies, so thank you. Item 6 is the Wilmington Metro Planning versus Cape Fear versus Grand Strand. Anything you want to add to that, Mr. Henley? Any questions that y'all may have for Mr. Henley on this? It's what Metro Group that Southport feels like it would get the most benefit from, and that would help us move forward in our transportation progress. So, Mr. Henley.
The only thing I would add is that just the Cape Fear RPO is what we are in now. Grand Strand, you'll hear them referred to as GSATs, the Grand Strand MPO. They have voted to pursue expansion up to and including us, BSL, St. James, Oak Island, so on and so forth. The Wilmington MPO has not voted yet. They are interested in whether we're interested or not, and then they will consider voting to expand. So there's two different deadlines. Wilmington is a little bit earlier in the process, so their deadline for us is a lot shorter than Grand Strand's deadline. There's pros and cons to both. There's a proposed motion down here. It could be that we're interested in both. It could be that we're interested in neither. But Dory and I can answer any questions.
So we're in the Rural Planning
Yes, we are.
Organization, the RPO right
Yes.
now. Is that going to continue? Or it sounds like that it's kind of going away and everybody's going to hook up with Grand Strand or Wilmington. Is that correct?
Well, it kind of depends, because the RPO also includes all of Columbus County and the vast majority of Pender County. And so depending on what happens with Brunswick County, a lot of the RPO's area in Brunswick County is unincorporated county. Not sure how that's going to shake out either. So the RPO could still retain the unincorporated areas, and then Columbus County and Pender County as
Is
well.
Brunswick County being asked or considering joining Grand Strand or Wilmington
I think-
for their rural area?
Wilmington not having voted yet, we're not going to be able to answer that yet to see how far their boundary is going to go.
But for GSATs, they were clear that they're only interested in the waterfront property, basically, the strip right along, Holden Beach, Ocean Isles, all the way down, and Southport would be the last one. I don't think they've included Bald Head. I think Southport is the last one, and their language was clear that they only wanted to include that part for the North Carolina, South Carolina one.
It's essentially the 211 corridor.
Is it
Right.
contiguous municipalities? The contiguous municipalities?
Correct,
Yeah.
and they want them to be contiguous as well. So if somebody in the middle fell out, we're the last one down.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's certainly the case for Grand Strand. The Wilmington MPO, it depends on how they vote in terms of how they want to expand, but we could theoretically connect to them via Fort Fisher. Since Fort Fisher and Curie Beach is already in the MPO, so the Wilmington MPO. There's going to be a lot of acronyms with this one, so
It's sort of like a tug of war, I mean, in a way. But in talking with Mayor of Charlotte, they're with Grand Strand, and they've been very pleased with it. They've received funding and that type thing, and so got to look at all the pros and cons of each one. I mean, who we more aligned with economically and that type thing. What makes more sense for Southport to be a part of? So I know there's a deadline, but we need to look at it pretty hard and see, and the board needs to make a decision since these deadlines are coming up. But don't also look at where we may get funding from and that type thing, and what have other municipalities done south of us, and are they pleased with it? And Charlotte seems to be pleased with, being a part of it.
it's we are under no obligation to join either of them. We can, and we're also under no obligation if we vote now to say we're interested, we can still change our mind later as well.
Do you have any sense of what Oak Island and St. James are considering? Have they even been approached? Have they thought about it?
They've been approached as far as
St. James, I think, expressed interest in joining the GSATs. They just made,
That is correct.
but no one else. And we've actually called either management or planning directors from a lot of municipalities to try to get a sense of how they feel about it, all of them. And it's really across the board. There's not really a clear answer or a clear recommendation. I don't think it's from staff at this point.
there's
For the time being, could we just proceed with telling both of them we're interested, and then to buy some time to sort of see how it shakes out?
I see no reason why not.
And one of the things that in the past I've heard was that with the Grand Strand, they tend, because of smaller municipalities involved, that there's more opportunity for, like Charlotte, like Mayor Hayden said. So I just want to make sure, I'm not sure how they allocate projects and money and that sort of thing, but if you could sort of make that part of your plus and minus column.
We have that benefit of being in the RPO too. We are, quite frankly, the biggest fish in the RPO. Maybe not by population, but certainly by everything else. Yes,
We're not rural.
yes.
Like we can look for the best opportunity possible and don't really have to make a definitive decision, but we're interested in both. and see what works best for our citizens and our city. Okay,
It's
so
nice to
thank
feel
you.
wanted, so.
So, but- Yes.
Give us a sewer treatment plant? They want us that bad?
All right. Next item is certainly appropriate, the noise ordinance. We get a lot of noise from over this last item, so how about the noise ordinance, Mr. Henley?
Yeah, how about the noise ordinance? The only change here is that following the meeting in June, we've added a section related to, sorry, I'm just pulling it up. There's an added section related to refuse pickup. Basically, it says that refuse pickup will be, there's a section of the ordinance 9-93 that talks about noises prohibited at certain times, and refuse pickup will be prohibited prior to 6 a.m. And that's the only change from what was in front of you last time.
That'll benefit those businesses in the yacht basin, so they can get in and get out and not have delivery trucks and dump trucks and these dumpsters being, trying to get emptied and that type of thing, all running into each other. So that'll be a benefit. Any questions?
The only
Sandy, on
question I
that?
have is the discretion. I know during the 4th, they needed to come earlier than that. So do you have the discretion for holidays, special, the city to determine?
I would say yes, under section 9-94, under B, community events. They're generally exempt, and so to me, the justification for July 4th fits right there.
Questions. We had an interesting demonstration as our first speaker was trying to talk about, emergency operations, and the leaf blower, I guess that's what that was, went off, and we couldn't hear. There are several landscaping companies and working in the city that use those, and they are virtually deafening. Where in this does that get covered? And can we incorporate perhaps a regulation that they need to be muffled?
That's certainly something that we could look into. I'm not sure that we could have that turned around between now and the meeting next week.
Yeah?
Generally, those things would be covered under the construction activity located in 993B8.
Yeah.
Construction activity, which is permitted between the hours of 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. Monday through Saturday. And then also noises generally exempt from this chapter, 9-94D, ordinary use of power tools, the ordinary use of noise-causing tools such as lawnmower, weed trimmer, chainsaw, as long as it complies with the 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. standard that.
But
I
that
mentioned
doesn't get
previously.
into the decibel level and so on.
It doesn't, but neither does the rest of the ordinance.
We've been advised by, I believe, the police chief that there are severe issues with attempting to use decibel levels as a threshold.
Another question, and it specifically pertains to the Haven, which we are going to be talking about in a little bit about the signs. But the Haven has live music with amps that begins generally on weekends around 1 or 2 in the afternoon and continues until about 8. During the week, it's often from about 5 to 8. And it backs up to a residential neighborhood. And that practically everybody in that neighborhood is passing around at this point and signing a petition asking them to discontinue the music. How in our time frame that we're addressing music, where does that fit And how will that be addressed?
As of right now, the way this draft is written, and I believe the way the current noise ordinance is written, that's permitted under the noise ordinance. Now, could we change it? Sure. But that would be the feedback that we would be looking for from the board. Sorry.
Okay, so are there no restrictions before
So
10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or whatever it is? I thought that even during, before then, earlier than that, there were restrictions. Isn't it like if you can hear it 200 feet away or something, or is that only after?
it's 500.
It's 500. There are no time, I don't think there are any time restrictions for that. It's 500 feet. Right, it's 500 feet, which is a long way.
Which actually goes all the way to the people who live on North Ward who say that they can't even sit on their back deck. West, and let's see, I guess, I don't know for sure if anybody on the other street, which would be West Brown, has complained or is part of that petition process. But if people at, say, 3 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the afternoon can't even sit on their back porch because the music is so deafening, what are we going to do about that? This seems to be a void in our ordinance.
Well, yep, I guess I'm losing my voice again. It could potentially be covered if it is of such a level as to be harmful. 993, noise is specifically prohibited. Number 10 is any other unreasonably loud noise as determined by a reasonable person with ordinary sensibilities. So I don't know if any of these residents with a problem with that particular business and the music has called the police and had them come to their property and actually verify what the, so that would be my recommendation is, let's have the police go out there and make a determination as to whether it fits under that. There is again, the section we mentioned about 500 feet, and if the board will recall, that was originally written as 100 feet when you first saw this, and the feedback was to back it down to, or back it up to 500. So.
I have a question before we go too far down the road on the leaf blowers. And while I would love to have a muffler on a leaf blower, I'm not sure they make such a thing. So I think we need to determine whether or not, before we entertain passing a law that says you have to have a muffler, that if there is no such thing. I have electric ones, and they are noisy as well.
Yeah,
You know?
certainly.
Does back right up into that residential area, and that the band area, you're right, Reverend Alderman Davis, it is right there in these people's backyards, and it's going that direction, and so that is something that we need to, staff should look at.
Can- so-
What do we need to add or change? I hate to go ahead and pass this and then come back at it. On the other hand, I hate not to pass this because it's definitely needed. What do we do?
I just want to add something. Part of the ordinance right now, section 992B, number 2 says the land use, nature, and zoning of the area from which the sound emanates from and the area where it is received is a factor in determining the unreasonableness of the noise. So the Haven is in a commercial district. That's the district they would have to consider to see whether it would be reasonable or not. And I think if we change the ordinance, it's going to be tricky because you've got the yacht basin area that has music, and it would affect every property in every business district or every, we would have to find very specific language.
What would the think the specific language would be addressed if the, one of the boundary lines or one of the property lines happen to be residential. So they are in the central business district in the front and on the sides, but in the back, they are adjoined by residential.
Are we saying we're gonna try to ban leaf blowers or just for certain times? It's a part of our life, a leaf blower.
I don't, we have said anything about leaf blowers. Has anybody, what about this? Can somebody, maybe Travis or Dory or somebody, write a letter or call the owners of the Haven and talk to them and say, look, we've had a lot of complaints about the noise. You know, I mean, are you willing, you know, before we get into a fight, can we just settle this amicably and maybe y'all, you know, can you do something? Turn it down a little bit, you know, build an amphitheater for the band to play in so it funnels the noise back towards House Street or whatever. Could we do that first?
Shouldn't we have them verify that the noise is beyond a limit also before we do anything?
Yes, and it would be helpful to have even just one complaint in writing that staff can point to, because I have not received any written complaints about the noise at the Haven. Not saying it hasn't happened, just they haven't gotten to me. And so
I think,
Yeah, my recommendation was first, go talk to the people.
Sure.
The owners of the Haven. Second, turned it off. Sorry. Oh, dear. And then second, you know, talk to the city and say, what can we do about this? But I have no knowledge about whether they've done any of that, but that was my first reaction when they complained to me.
I think that that's probably just one, I mean, for me, I struggle with trying to, because this is almost us trying to craft language as it relates specifically to one person, one property, one business. And there's live music throughout Southport on a regular basis every Wednesday night at the wine shop. You go down to Tap and Cellar. And so I think this is good. My only other question, and Dory, you may know this, is what time is our sweeper was still out? I'm sure some of you passed it. I passed it. I sent Karen a little note making sure she wasn't walking. But yeah, I was. But what time is it going out? Because it's still out there after 9, and it's not being very productive. Very productive.
You're saying it's still out after 9 o'clock in the morning? I guess it just depends on how much they're planning on doing that day, but I can check with Public Services Director.
But it is exempt from the ordinance.
Yes.
I thank you for coming back with the language.
Yeah. So, yeah, we solved the dumpster issue, and now we have the Haven issue. So we'll, you know, music is going to be music, and it's going to be all over town. I agree with you, Alderman Carroll. And there are ways to maybe mitigate it, put a shell, that type thing. So good suggestion, Alderman Allen. So the sound goes forward instead of back into those neighborhoods and that type thing. So,
But I do think, Travis, number 10 that you pointed out gives you some flexibility in enforcement to have those conversations.
absolutely, there we go.
let's go to a less controversial topic, the right-of-ways. you know, I don't think there's going to be I don't think there's a 100% agreement on this. I believe in the cooperative, collaborative, what's in the right of way. People have had them there, some for decades, some more recently. But I think we get to a point where if there's something in the right of way that it's unsafe or it is a hazard or the city needs to do work underneath, and of course I think these people understand it needs to be removed. But other than that, I think we need to have a hard stop where you just got to quit putting things in the right of way, and we move forward. And I don't know how the board feels about that, but like I said before, I don't think we should be in the business of digging up their plants and azaleas and everything else. And let's see how we can come together and collaborate on this with our citizens. And again, with the idea of safety and the knowledge that if we have to do work in that right of way, they understand that it will be removed and that they're and that they would understand that. So anyway, Travis, I'll look forward to your discussion and board's discussion and questions.
Yeah, I mean, I'll present this in the meeting, but essentially we've provided a couple different options for you with regard to surfacing of those parking spaces that we've talked about. And really what we came down to is just follow the same surfacing standards that are already in the UDO today and just keep it the same. Don't try to do anything too different, because that'll at least ensure that the look of them follows the look of the driveways that have already been built. The only other thing to talk about is grandfathering, and you've got three options. The first is no grandfathering, which if that's the case, then the ordinance enforced as written does not allow for grandfathering. The second option is grandfathering to a point at which the city would have to remove it, and then once it's removed, it cannot be put back. And the third is you can keep it until the city has to remove it, and then you could put it back. Those are, at this point, we're looking for a direction from the board as to what the board would like to see, and then from there, we start the heavy PR campaign to get out on the street, get the feedback on what we've got here as a proposal, and then we'll bring that forward to you for adoption in the future once that effort's over.
Well, I like the second option. I think that's the option we should go with. And then but from this point on, will the right-of-way ordinance be totally enforced?
Yes.
And we've double-checked to make sure that when the neighbor's saying, why is this guy, not you, yeah, you, why is this guy got his lawn furniture and everything out there, and I just moved in, and you're holding it against me because I just moved in? We're going to be on solid ground if we go to court over that.
Absolutely. The same way we would be if we changed the Unified Development Ordinance and
Okay.
the neighbor has a short-term rental that they established and they're allowed to continue
Okay.
it.
I just want to make sure that
It's the same.
we feel comfortable that we're doing that. Because and Karen and I have had this conversation a number of times, I'm a kind of a hybrid of all of this in that it's quite clear that elected officials, not necessarily this board, but elected officials and managers have allowed things it was brought to their attention by the homeowner, and they were said something. I will assume the something was, you can do it up until the time that we need the piece of property. Whether that was all said, I don't know, but we wouldn't be able to prove otherwise now. So if we need the piece of property, like if we're going to finish off Kingsley Pier, there's no parking at Kingsley Pier. So why are we doing that if the only thing you can do is walk to it? I mean, it's good for those people that can walk to it. But there's a piece of property that's being developed right now that was bought, but the previous owner moved rocks and plants and fences and everything else right out to the roadway. This might be an opportune time to take that back, not because there's an emergency, that's the issue that I had, if we only put emergency in there, but there's a reason to do it, and we take it back so people can park near Kingsley Pier and enjoy that.
Absolutely.
And it would be consistent with most of that roadway that you can pull off and park.
Absolutely.
So that language in there and the grandfathering or the explanation of stuff that it's not just for an emergency, if there's a good purpose.
It's public
If-
purposes and
Yeah.
safety and emergency and the whole.
So, one of the issues that I have with that idea is that somebody is choosing what locations are of significance to have parking. So, perhaps I would find it more appealing to drive over to West Street and park off of West Street and walk down the sidewalk there and enjoy that community amenity just as much as someone might find using the pier to be of significance. So this idea that we're going to pick and choose where we need I mean, the whole purpose of this space is for the parking for the city. I don't disagree with Rich that what has happened down there is one of the grossest examples of why we need to enforce our right-of-way, but we've had language that already exists. It should be enforced, and it should be, I just don't think it should be grandfathered. You know, if I went out to plant plants today and nobody called you guys to complain, am I grandfathered in when this comes?
That's the way it's written now. is
Do
that
I
it would-
do I have the ability then to prevent the Methodists from parking in my front yard? Is that what happens? And is that the right thing to do? It's not. So, I'm opposed to grandfathering.
Thing. I mean, it's I mean,
not hard to-
philosophically, I agree with you, but I mean, are we going to go down West Street and tear out every plant that's in the right of way?
Certainly hardened structures have to go. I think hardened structures have to go. We give them 6 months to remove them, and they're gone. With regards to plantings, if we decide that we can grandfather in plantings, I could be receptive to that. You know, but there's so many examples. West Street's a great example of all of that's parking. You know, you'd never park on it because it's beautifully maintained. They've spent tons of money to landscape, but technically it's our right of way. We can go and park there. So
I don't necessarily philosophically disagree with you, except the amount of aggravation this is going to cause for the city is just astronomical. I'd be willing to start chipping away at it. On the 4th of July, you've coned out for your front yard? No. You're no longer going to do that. You're no longer going to say, no, you can't come down the street, which is what people tried to do this 4th of July. So you don't own that property, and we should remind them, because if you drove around on the 4th of July, there's a lot of people that decided that is theirs. That is for their family, their people, and that's not accurate. So I'm more willing to chip away at it each year, as opposed to the draconian method of coming in here and causing mayhem when I don't have to cause mayhem to do it. We can cause enough mayhem just being us.
What I want to say, I support not getting rid of hardened structures, for sure. And I think vegetation is a separate issue that we can't put that genie necessarily back in the bottle unless it's a hazard and it's a this and it's that. One of the things I'll tell you, and it's true, in the past it's been inconsistent, the administration of our ordinance, but I will tell you that my neighbor applied to do a fence that was already there, and they were told they couldn't do it, so they didn't do it. I think what we see is a lot of asking forgiveness, not permission. I have a quick question. At one point, I believe, Travis, you said something about a time period for structures and that sort of thing in right-of-way. Could you sort of clarify that for me?
So yeah, it would effectively, once we adopt something, there would be in an ideal world, there would be a grace period, and whatever you're using that, one, to document anything we have decided we're going to grandfather, you're using it to document that. You're also using that time to give folks the ability to remove anything that we're telling them they're able to remove. So to Alderman Carroll's point, 6 months to remove hardened structures, I mean, that's exactly how this was intended to be approached.
Is there any rights that the city loses over time with regard to appropriation of right-of-way?
I don't believe so. I think that's maybe a better question for Brady, but my understanding is that it is impossible to obtain a prescriptive easement on public property.
You can't claim adverse possession on public property.
Right. So there's, based on that, there could be right-of-way encroachments that have existed for 50 years. It's still public property. We would still have the ability to take it out if we so chose to do so.
Can we talk a little bit about what these hardened structures look like? Because I think we have an idea that the hardened structures would be things that are vertical from the ground. This could also be raised borders for driveways. There are I'm just trying to make sure we understand what we're talking about here.
There's one right there. On.
Yes, yes.
Walls.
Yeah, if it's raised, yeah, walls, there is example right on Lord.
Because of drainage. Water was coming down and going right toward the house and pooling under and up against the house. And the only way to redirect it was the, I guess, what is it, about that high, brick border for the driveway. If we require that that's taken down, what's the city going to do to help prevent that?
I think we're obligated to not dump water.
Well, who put it there?
There's more solution than one to any problem.
Who put it there, I think, is part of the question, because if the city said this is a solution to, but that's different. I guess you have a cause for it, and if the city could prescribe, the city could say, yes, there's cause, so that your house doesn't continue to have water flowing under it.
That's for the public good. I mean, not only the
Right.
homeowner, but for society as a whole. And I see a house crumbling from rot and termites and everything else and flooding.
I guess where that wouldn't be the case is if it's a border that extends to the road, that becomes really a hazard. It's a hazard for people trying to walk, and if you're like at the bottom of Bay and Kingsley, if you wanted to jump out of the way of a car, you couldn't. It's, you don't have anywhere to go. So do we have consensus on the hardened structures, or?
It's case by case. Now that down there at Kingsley, that's been a problem since Bruce was here as city manager. That was brought up. Mayor Pro Tem brought that up when they put those rocks there initially, and so now we're at a point where we have an ordinance that is for the public good to have that, whether for parking or for a sidewalk or for walking or whatever. The city needs to reclaim that area, and that is the right of way, and that would be a benefit to the public good by doing so. But that's been there, like I say, 5-6 years now. It's time to mitigate that.
Can we be sure that a city official did not give them permission? Because, you say it doesn't matter, but in a way it does, because I'm thinking of one property in my mind. City officials gave this person, maybe it was unofficial, but said, go ahead and do it.
Have
with
to
the
let-
same
We're gonna have to
risk.
let the city attorney and staff figure it out.
That out.
I mean, it's,
Right, because it's
The problem,
you're not given the land. Land, it's owned by the citizens.
I mean, unfortunately, when you fail to do what's right for several decades, you get a mess that has to be cleaned up.
Case by case, staff, attorney, and we'll work through it. It's not something we have
And-
to do immediately. We have to start.
I'm in favor of, I mean, I wish that there was a way that we could just get everything out of the right of ways. I just don't, that's what I'd like to do. That would be my first preference. I just don't think it's feasible. So I guess as a sort of a compromise, I guess I'm in favor, still thinking about it, but it sounds like to me that eliminating hardened structures and leaving plants is really about the only, grandfathering in the plants is really about the only thing we can do, frankly, that's viable, unfortunately.
One question, Travis. The language that's in the current UDO that says nothing above the horizontal plane, I believe that's the language, that does allow for irrigation into that space because it's not above the horizontal plane.
Yes, you could
Okay.
certainly read it that way, yes.
Okay.
If somebody tears up your irrigation, it's you.
That's
It
your
ain't-
problem.
It's
Yeah,
not
same.
our problem. It's not, if somebody parks on it and runs over it, that ain't their fault either. I mean,
Right.
that's-
So but I am not opposed to irrigation. I think it helps to keep Southport beautiful. So, are we good with that too? I mean, if somebody came and did that,
Hardened structures above grade. I
okay.
guess that would be what we would go for.
Irrigation, though, is that, you're irrigating your grass and plants that you put out there. And altogether, while that's beautification of the area, that also sends the message, don't park here, you know?
True when the sprinklers are running, but the rest of the time, I mean, nobody can even tell they're there. Frankly, if they get run over a few times, everybody's gonna quit doing irrigation.
I didn't make myself clear here, apparently. The irrigation keeps the grass and the vegetation. Without it, you might lose that. But as long as there's a lot of grass and vegetation, drivers looking for a place to park don't have any place to go except Alderman Carroll's yard.
True. One of the reasons I don't have
His yard.
I don't have irrigation. I don't have irrigation in the yard in front of my house that is not mine. But I would love to, because every time city staff shows up to mow it, it is just a dust bomb. So I think for that reason, I would be in favor of it. Us allowing irrigation into the right of way, but nothing above the horizontal plane. No hardened structures anyway.
Case by case is going to propagate confusion. And do you remember about a year ago, I think, somebody on, I believe it's West Owens, came to us. It may have been, yeah, I think it was West Owens. They had bought a property, they either renovated or tore down an old house and then built a new one or the other. And in the process, they removed vegetation, some bushes and things that had been there. And then after all the dust had settled, they replanted. And then were quite surprised and upset to be told that they couldn't do that. That all that was in the right of way and they couldn't. So, if we go case by case, And, you know, one of the things that they pointed out was, hey, our neighbors have vegetation. They have nice bushes in their right-of-way. So why us? There is going to be a sense of, why are you picking on me? And so.
Of course there
hard and
is, but-
fast rules are going to help.
Well, I mean, I don't think we're not saying we're going to do it on a case-by-case basis. I mean, we haven't decided anything, but it sounds like to me what we're going to say is that hardened structures, fences and swings and posts and whatever's got to go, but landscaping can stay, but you can't add, if you take it out, you can't put it back.
Mailboxes
I don't
are
think that's a
exempt?
case-by-case basis. Now, obviously, within that, there's going to be some specific circumstances, maybe like over here on Lord Street where we've got, you know, water issue that we're going to have to look at. I suppose that's a case-by-case basis, but I don't think we're not talking about everything just being a case-by-case basis.
And the idea of sod and irrigation, it would continue to be allowed because it meets the current ordinance standard of the horizontal plane. So that's how that you couldn't add an azalea out there essentially, but you could
Put up some "Yes, you can park here" signs throughout town.
Can
Sponsored by,
mailboxes,
sponsored by Alderman Allen, yes.
mailboxes? I think we need to put a caveat in there that mailboxes be allowed. Otherwise, somebody's going to say, well, that's a fixed structure. And then we're going to get into that big debate. Okay?
In the course of the education process, we got to make clear to people that the city plants trees in the right-of-way, and no, we're not going to come along and just massacre all the city's beautiful live oaks in the right-of-way. That came up at a public meeting about 3 months ago when somebody was questioning the whole right-of-way policy issue.
Talking about mailboxes, couldn't we require them to go on the owner's property? They don't have a right to put it in the right-of-way, do they?
It's not the owner that I care about. It's the postal service. They'd have to get out of the truck every time to walk up and put it in the mailbox. Now they just drive along and they just reach out their arm.
But for the most part, if the mailbox was behind the right-of-way in their property, in most cases, there shouldn't be anything in there, so the mail carrier can just drive up and put it in the box.
They got the gully, like in our neighborhood, we have the gullies. You'd have to traverse that to get to my property.
Well, and there's some places, John, where the sidewalk's been inappropriately installed, so it is not up against the property line. If it's up against the property line, you're 100%. I think what's happened is they've moved the sidewalk to the street, which has created a whole other conversation. And quite honestly, we need language that defines what we do with the sidewalks. They're supposed to go along the property line, and that's not necessarily been the case. So I think there's, to Rich's point, I think there is province for those mailboxes that are because of the sidewalk placement.
The biggest problem with all this is in the downtown historic district, and I don't think there's any mail. Everybody gets walk-up mail delivery to the box on their porch anyway. So.
We talked about this at the Historic Preservation Commission as it relates to street trees, and the forestry, does install these trees. I wonder if, I guess one of my thoughts is that the city so we talked about a specific scenario where someone removed trees that were on public property. They got a permit to do so. They had this false idea that they were required to put back those trees, but the law doesn't allow them to put back those trees because you can't plant trees in the right-of-way. So, this community that so appreciates our trees has laws that prevent someone from putting back trees that they took out.
What I would say about that is they can donate the money. The city has done that where a tree, he lived over, you know who I'm thinking of, that passed. Anyway, there was not a good tree in front of his house that was removed. He said if he would remove it, the city would remove it, he would donate to have live oaks. Russ Ferris would replant. So that, we have the wherewithal to facilitate that, not necessarily them planting in right of way, because that then becomes, I'm assuming, a liability. I mean, you don't want to give an individual permission to do something in right of way.
Right.
But we have the facility.
So is there an application, Lo, is there an application where they can request placement of these trees? And I apologize for my ignorance on that.
Not really.
Just ask Forestry Commission about it, I guess.
Yeah, there's so many people who don't even realize that the forestry committee exists or what we do, but one of the key things we do is plant trees, and in the right-of-way and parks and city property and so on, and always alert to permits that have been issued. And if the permit is to take a tree down in the right-of-way, we're looking to see, is this a good place to replace a tree? Sometimes it's just a bad place for a tree, you know.
Yeah, I guess one of my thoughts is having that conversation on the front end for driveway placement and other things might be a really good step that we could have to make sure that we're getting trees put back in to the right-of-way if they're taken out, or even if they're not, if we just think it's an appropriate place to have a tree added.
Squelch this good discussion, but we've got to get out of here in about 10 minutes, right?
Quick, we can probably address that by including, if you get a permit to remove a tree in the public right-of-way, right now, I don't even think there's a fee for that, is there?
You're not going to get a permit to remove a tree in a public right-of-way, I don't believe, are you? The city,
If somebody wanted to remove a tree in a public right-of-way, they would contact the city, and the city would examine the tree and determine if it needed to be removed.
So they don't specifically get a permit for that? Yeah, okay. And the dialogue could be, well, this is what it costs to replace that. What you gonna do?
The fee in lieu idea of a fee in lieu of replacement of trees is something that I've seen in other places, but it's not in the UDO right now, that's an option. So if that's something that the board wants to see, then we need it in the ordinance.
that's also tricky because then it creates that dynamic of being able to ask for that. So that's, that's a whole nother conversation.
It's got to be guardrails for that one, for sure.
Okay, good conversation. So we're at the past the 2-hour mark here. So let's item 9. This is concerning the sign illumination text amendment. Any questions on that? It's a public hearing. Any issues on that?
Just for this one and the next one, all we're asking the board to do is set the public hearing for August. They're
Okay.
not public hearings themselves.
So for that, for 9 and for 10. Okay. And the appointment for the Board of Adjustment, those interviews have been done. Mayor Pro Tem sat in on those. And Mr. Lombardi, any update
There
on
was
that?
3 openings and 3 applied only, and they were all present members. We've interviewed them, approved them, and I will make that announcement at the meeting.
Thank you. All right. So we'll go with, I just have a brief comment. Make sure you buy your Powerball. It's like 300 and some million. If I win, we're all going to retire. So get that ticket. Go to Bob's, absolutely. And there's a gallery walk tonight. They're having awards at Franklin Square Gallery, so if you want to stop by there. And thank you for this excellent meeting. These workshops are good. The presentations were excellent, and we'll look forward to the meeting next week. Board comments, Mr. Allen? Alderman Alt? Mr. Carroll? Alderman, could you make note of that, please? Alderman Davis?
Shockingly,
no. Alderman Lombardi?
One quick one. I read in the paper that we sold our 400 acres, and now the
Yeah.
board is not being trusted anymore. So I just want to say it has not been sold, and we are getting appraisals.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem? All right. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Lombardi, second by Mayor Pro Tem. All in favor? Meeting adjourned. Thank you so much. Thank you, staff.